How do you think about personal branding? What is building a personal brand to you?
So to me, it's you have your personality as part of it. What I see a lot of
Yeah.
people do on LinkedIn, and I think this is a mistake, is they're only focusing on their business. They're only focusing on educating, which may get you sales, and it may work for you in the short term. But in the long term, I think building a personal brand that's about you and about your interests and what you care about and more like focused on you as a person is.
Hey, we just did an interview with Isabel Stern. She has over 7,000 followers on LinkedIn and a highly engaged audience that loves her. Now, we cover various topics as how to bring your personality to your content, how to create a highly engaged audience through content, and how to connect with people through various different interests and insights that you might have along the way. Now, Isabel is highly experienced, she's really good at what she does, and I want to take you quickly through her profile to show you what she's all about. All right, so I'm going to take you quickly through Isabel's profile here. She has 7,679 followers and a highly engaged audience, as mentioned in the video before. I'm just showing you this quickly to show you that she knows what she's talking about, and I think you're going to really enjoy this interview. So stay tuned, enjoy the show, drop any questions or comments that you might have along the way, and we'll talk to you soon.
Well, thanks for having me. So I work with solopreneurs and small business owners and help them build their brands on LinkedIn.
Cool. Awesome. I really like, and I guess the reason I want to chat with you, I really enjoy how you bring personality to your brand, to your content. I feel like, first of all, you're hilarious. You write the world's best jokes on LinkedIn, I must admit. And I think you bring a lot of just personality to your content. How do you think about bringing personality to content, and how do you approach content? Because I think you approach it in a very unique way compared to many people that I see.
Yeah, when I first started posting on LinkedIn, I'd say that I was similar to I was trying to emulate a lot of the big influencers you see on there. And I
Mhm.
realized after a certain time that it just didn't feel like me. And I also
Mhm.
started to realize I was getting burned out because
Uh,
it's tiring to feel like you have to fit some template or use certain hooks or use certain formulas. So I started making more of a conscious effort to bring elements of myself that I think are important, like humor, just sharing. I have a lot of interests. So bringing some of those different interests into what I posted. And I also found that posting frequently kind of freed me from that idea that I had to have this
mm,
persona. I think just like
mm. Yep.
the repetition gets rid of that mask to a certain extent. So, yeah.
I think a lot of folks struggle with that on the consistency side. It's like it sounds brutal, but it's like I'd rather show up consistently mediocre to the point where I become consistently excellent. Because then
Mhm.
throughout showing up again and again and again, you kind of I don't want to say you care less, but it's like it's about getting the piece of content finished and out and published than it is like having the perfect post. And I guess there's a time and a place, obviously, for perfecting a piece. But that's really cool. I like that. How do you approach creating content on that note?
So I post every day and I don't plan it ahead of time, which is a big no-no. Like
Cool.
some people
Yeah.
are would gasp if they heard that I did that. Some people really
Yeah.
like to have that calendar planned out ahead of time and that works for them. For me,
Yeah.
it doesn't work that way. I like to write when I feel moved to write something or excited
Mm.
about an idea because I think that
Mm.
comes across.
Yeah. It comes
When
out in your like creation. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so I personally prefer to I might be reading something or listen to a podcast,
Mm.
and that will spark another idea that I can relate back to my business and what I do. So that's how I work. That's maybe
Yeah.
not realistic for everyone else. But the way
Yeah.
I make it work for me is I still do think about certain like content buckets. So, there are
Mm.
going to be some posts where I'm promoting, just straight up promoting my services or sharing testimonials, and then there'll be more educational posts, and then I'll sprinkle in more like humor posts that are kind of more personality. So I
Yeah.
have those ideas in my head, but I'm
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
planning it out ahead of time.
I fully agree. I many times I've planned content. I then start second guessing it before I publish it. If it spends too much time in a Google Doc, I'm like going over it, trying to fine tune it, trying to edit all the pieces. Whereas like, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily hit publish on a lot of pieces that just go to like the Google Doc graveyard and die. They just don't. They
Yeah.
just don't ever see the day of light. That's cool. I dig that. I think. I think to the point what you said with excitement, like your energy comes across when you're excited about the piece that you're writing about. Like you're happy to be writing about it. Like it's
Mhm.
actually an enjoyable piece of content. That's cool. How do you think about personal branding? What is building a personal brand to you?
So to me, it's you have your personality as part of it. What I see a lot of
Yeah.
people do on LinkedIn, and I think this is a mistake, is they're only focusing on their business. They're only focusing on educating, which may get you sales, and it may work for you in the short term. But in the long term, I think building a personal brand that's about you and about your interests and what you care about and more like focused on you as a person is
Yeah.
a better long term option because then it also gives you the option to pivot
Yeah.
down the line
I I
and
love
people will
that.
know
Yeah,
you.
you're not
So, yeah.
like you're not tied to sharing that expertise. You're the being you. You're a dynamic human with
Mhm.
varying interests. That's cool. I love that. Where do you find folks get often caught up in building a personal brand? Like what challenges do you like in people that you're talking to? Like where do they get kind of they fumble and they're just like, I'm just like it's too much or whatever.
I think one issue with a lot of the advice on LinkedIn is that it creates this perception that there's a right way and a wrong way to show up
Mm,
online. And
mm,
it keeps people from experimenting and figuring out their own style. So
yeah.
I notice I'll talk to a lot of people and they'll say, am I doing this right? Like, can you look back at
Mm,
my own posts? Like, what are my
yeah.
mistakes? And I always say, like, you're learning something from each post. Like, you'll
Mm,
see if you start to get DMs based on a certain post or start making sales
yeah.
on a certain post. And also, some posts don't directly tie to sales right away. Like, you might just
Mm,
share a joke. And then, like, I've had people come to me and they'll say, I wanted to work with you because I like your humor. And that's it. It didn't even
mm.
have to do with
It's
like an
amazing.
educational post. They just
Yeah.
like
Vibe
wanted
with
to
you.
work with me as a person.
Yeah, yeah.
So sometimes it's not always clear like what's working and what's not
Yeah.
working. It takes a lot of experimenting and again consistency to figure out your own style, and that's when you'll
Yeah.
start to see success when you start really developing your own voice that stands out.
I dig that. How do you think about humor? I know, I know you and I joked before about like being medium funny is usually the way to go about something.
Yeah.
However, it's like comedy is almost an art and a science as well. Like it's trending, relevant. It's like bringing back like the piece that was funny before to make like a joke. How do you think about humor? Are you naturally a funny person? And how do you think about the comedy that you post? Because it's genuinely funny. Like some of your comments that I've seen will have more engagements than the post itself. Like people, there will be more laugh reacts on your funny comments that you leave than the actual post that somebody posts. I thought that's actually it's hilarious and also interesting because I think we're like vying for connection, and I think through humor we connect a lot. But I'm curious how you think about humor.
Yeah, I love comedy. I my whole life have been watching like SNL. I used to love Jim Carrey as a kid. Like I wrote him a
Ah,
letter.
cool.
um,
Ah, cool. That's
just
awesome.
yeah, I think laughter is powerful. I think the world needs more of it,
Yeah.
and so I don't in terms of like a science behind it, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's just I've learned to trust my gut on things. So I
Mm,
if I observe something, usually you'll have a gut reaction or an immediate
mm,
response in your head. And a lot of times, what we do is we kind of like overthink or censor or
mm,
question. So
yeah.
I'd say a lot of my comedy just comes from like trusting my gut responses to things and
Yeah.
also watching a lot of comedy, reading a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah.
humorous things.
Yeah.
So kind of absorbing that.
Cool. No, that's awesome. I think that's a good segue into talking about masking, because I think many folks don't often share their exact truth because they're wearing a mask, they're hiding themselves from their actual content. So tell me, like, I know we talked about this little pre-interview, but like, what's your thoughts on like masking and like yeah, why is it holding people back, and what do you think benefits people by, like, removing this facade that often we try and put on?
Yeah, so I think a lot of us come from maybe more traditional work, maybe office backgrounds where you
Mm.
are expected to have that professional persona, to get
Yeah,
promoted, to fit in, to get by.
yeah,
Um, so, I can just speak to working with solopreneurs. The benefit of being a solopreneur is you no longer have to be answering to someone. You have
mm.
the freedom to have your own voice now. You can establish your professional presence however
Mm.
it makes sense to you. And I think the whole definition of professionalism is changing as well. I think
Yeah.
culture in general is getting more casual. Like it's not
Mm.
like 20 years ago where it was super buttoned up and formal. I mean, maybe certain
Yeah,
industries like
yeah,
finance,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
but in general, I'd say we're trending towards a more like casual culture and more
yeah,
freedom and flexibility with sharing your personality. And
yeah, yeah.
not only that, but I think you really need to lean into that now to stand out because
Mm.
there's a bazillion, boring, dry business messages
Yeah,
out
yeah.
there.
How did you approach kind of like, I guess, demasking yourself? Because I know I read something before that like you realized that you were basically masking your personality in a lot of your content, and it led to burnout. So what thinking process did you go through to, like, yeah, realize more of yourself in your work?
I think it was helpful to start getting positive reinforcement when I would show, like when I
Mm.
used
Yeah.
humor and then people would react positively to it, it kind of made
Mm.
me more comfortable because I was like, oh, I
Interesting.
actually don't need to hide this part of myself. People actually really like this part. And I can
Yeah.
keep bringing that and people are responding positively to it. So I think my
Yeah.
fear before when I was maybe too formal business buttoned up was that
Yeah.
if I showed anything else, people would reject me. And that
Ah,
was the fear. But I realized that
interesting.
people were accepting of it. So it kind of flipped how I viewed all of that.
That's cool. I like that a lot. Is there anything else you would suggest somebody does to, I guess, find more of their true self, like more of themselves inside their content and inside their sharing? Like maybe they're not funny, but maybe they have just different sides of their personality that they might not be showing. Is there anything you'd suggest that they explore or work on, or?
Don't overthink, just go. Just
Mm.
start creating a lot. I think
Yeah.
there's some quote where it's like give yourself the opportunity for an edit and to
Mm.
edit how you want to present yourself, you need to create a lot. So you could
Yeah,
create
yeah.
100 different posts and maybe you end up deleting 20 of them or whatever,
Mm.
but you give yourself the opportunity to
Mm.
see the different sides of yourself, to see kind of trends in the type of content you're creating. Maybe you notice
Yeah.
that you're drawn to certain topics, or maybe you're noticing some common thread, and that can give you a lot of answers. So definitely repetition, creating a lot
Mm.
would be my advice.
I love that. I think there's this like common misconception that it all has to be perfect before it
Mhm.
goes out. And
Yeah.
like you never get to clarity without creating. Like clarity comes through
Mhm.
creation. And then as
Yeah.
you create, you stumble upon the different pieces that are like, oh, that really worked. And that comes back to your point earlier. Like you got positive reinforcement that these pieces worked. And it's like, oh, let's do more of that. That's cool. I like that. I know we spoke a little bit about masking, and you mentioned a lot of folks are coming to you for kind of like deprogramming. Like they've spent a lot of time in the corporate world, and they're trying to, like, again, bring their full selves to content. So what are some of your thoughts around like the whole deprogramming side of things?
Yeah, so a lot of people were coming to me. So also this past year, I found out I'm neurodivergent. So I get a
Mm,
lot of people who are also neurodivergent and
yeah.
think differently. Basically, they think in a different way, and felt that they had
Hmm.
to change their behavior in an office setting
Hmm.
to fit in, to be
Yeah.
accepted. So a lot of it is me just telling people they're okay to share who they are. It's almost like giving them permission to be themselves after years
Interesting.
of kind of being told to not be who they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just creating like safe spaces for people and
Mm,
acceptance for people, and
yeah.
knowing that no matter who you are and how you think, there's going to be a community of people who are going to support you because it's the internet
100%.
and there's millions of people out there. You're going to find your group. And
Mm,
so I think that gives us all a lot more freedom to be who we are instead of, feeling like you have to fit into this box and maybe more of those
mm.
traditional office environments.
I dig that a lot. I think LinkedIn as a platform too is like a very accepting platform. Out of all the
Mhm.
social platforms I've spent time on, it's like, wow, people here are like genuinely kind. Like
Yeah.
there's I've rarely met somebody that's like, you got Facebook and Instagram and like they can be a bit of a cesspool sometimes, like not to be too blunt, but like some of the comment sections can be like brutal, whereas LinkedIn, like most people are super supportive. I dig that a lot. Do you think like a lot of the deprogramming, just to kind of keep going on that topic a bit, something that came up for me is like, when we're in grade school, when we're like younger, like we always want to fit in, we want to make friends, we want to like, just be accepted. Like, do you think a lot of that comes from that era as well in our like human development, for say?
Yeah, for sure. I think it comes from all our experiences, from your
Mm,
family, from your school, from your office
mm,
setting. Yeah, and of course we all want to fit in. Like it makes complete sense why we
yeah.
would mask. But
Mm,
I think online you can go back to being more yourself and kind of find who you were as a kid before you put on all of that,
mm, yeah, yeah.
and find other people who have similar experiences and
Mm,
fit in still, just with maybe the group that you're more meant to be around.
yeah. I love that. This is great. I think we covered some cool topics. Is there anything specifically, like let's say someone's building a personal brand or creating content in regards to writing? I know a lot of folks get caught up in like the process of writing. How do you go about, whether it be finding content pillars or preparing a piece, like whether it's like a longer extensive piece of content? Do you do research beforehand? Do you have a bunch of ideas that you pull from, or like what's your thought process around just writing in general?
So a lot of times if I feel stuck, usually what I'll do is I'll read anything.
Mm,
And
smart.
usually when I read anything, I'll see a word, and that will kind of create a thought pattern and make me
Yep.
think about different, memories from my life or
I
experiences.
love that.
So that's what I would recommend to anyone who's stuck is, if you're looking for inspiration or having a hard time writing, you probably need more input and like external
Mm,
inspiration.
love that.
Yeah.
That's so true. If I reflect to like any time in my life that I've had massive like, yeah, writer's block or just not wanting to create, there was a huge lack of me taking various inputs in, like whether it be podcasts or courses or trainings or books or whatever it be. It's like a lot of these, I call them idea seeds, kind of just yeah, it plants an idea in our brain. And then from there, it becomes a great piece of content in the future. That's cool. I like that a lot. Okay. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you feel you'd like to cover?
No, this was great. Thank you for having me on. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was a great conversation. It was straight and to the point, and I really appreciate your input and your viewpoint. I think you're building like a really strong personal brand and a great community around everything you're doing. So
Thanks.
awesome.
Oh, yeah. I'll plug my
Thank you so much.
newsletter. Sign up for my
Yeah.
newsletter.
Yeah, do it. What's the newsletter?
So you can find it. It's best to go through my LinkedIn profile. So if you just look me up on
Yeah.
Isabel Stern, it's called Cringe Letter. It's on Substack.
Cool.
Yeah. All right.
Awesome. Heck yeah.
Thank you.